You've got to use the mic because we can't hear you in the back.
Okay. Can you hear me better now? All right, I'm sorry. So I was asked to come here and be the lawyer. I put on the lawyer's costume. You all have seen me in the lawyer's costume. I actually hate the lawyer's costume, so if you don't mind, let me just get more. How do I move this? Oh, here we go. There we go. Got it. So my name is Jeff Rabin, and all I do in my law practice is help people who are disabled and are trying to get benefits from the Social Security Administration. I became a lawyer in 1980 and started out downtown with a small general practice firm where I got stuck with the Social Security work because nobody else wanted to deal with the clientele or this bureaucracy. As time went on, I found I liked the clientele and I liked the bureaucracy a whole lot more than I like other lawyers. And the nice thing about my work is I don't have to deal with them. It's me, my client, and the judge, and off we go. I did my first disability case in 1981. I set up my own law firm in 1988 just to do Social Security disability work. I do this all over the country. I talk to groups like this all over the country. I've testified before Congress. I was even a bad guy on a 60 Minutes episode because I believe people with substance abuse deserve help. Leslie Stahl didn't. She won, I lost, but it was kind of an interesting experience. So this is my thing. This talk that I normally give on Social Security disability is 90 minutes long, and they gave me 30. So two things are going to happen. We're not going to cover the entire handout, but the handout is important, and I have to leave out some of my jokes. But we're going to try to get through as much as we can. So what I want to cover this morning is I first want to define for you what it means to be totally disabled, because that phrase has a legal meaning and it's important. I want to talk about what SSDI is and what SSI is and what the differences are, because that's important for family planning. Then I want to talk about how Social Security actually treats Huntington's disease and what you need to do in order to be able to get these benefits. If I do this right, you all will never have to call me because you'll be able to do this on your own. So let's see if we can get that done. All right, so page 3 of the handout. What does it mean to be totally disabled? In order for me to get somebody Social Security benefits, I've got to prove the existence of permanent medical impairment, severe precludes ability to perform any substantial gainful activity for a period that's lasted expected to last 12 months or result in death. See, this lady was going to write that down. And that's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo. Here's what it means. In order for me to get somebody benefits, I have to be able to prove that they are suffering from symptoms which so impact their day-to-day life that they could not function at any kind of job available in the national economy for a period that's already lasted or expected to last 12 months or result in death in 12 months. So the focus in a disability case is not on the diagnosis. People with Huntington's do work, especially in the very beginning. People with cancer work, people with AIDS work, people with multiple sclerosis work. So the focus is not on whether my clients have a label. The focus in Social Security disability cases are what are the symptoms from that label and how does the evidence, and we're going to come to this word proof and evidence in a minute, how does the evidence document how those symptoms impact their ability to function? So if somebody calls me and they have a physical medical problem, a bad back, a bad heart, a breathing problem, Huntington's, how do the symptoms impact the physical motions of working? How does it affect sitting in a chair? How does it affect standing? How does it affect walking? How does it affect lifting and reaching and pushing and pulling? Those physical motions involved in every job, how are they impacted by the symptoms from whatever that physical medical problem is? If somebody calls me up and they have a mental impairment, major depressive disorder, anxiety disorder, anorexia, PTSD, agoraphobia, the most common call we get is bipolar. What are the symptoms of the mental impairment, and how do those symptoms impact the basic mental motions of work? Understanding and remembering simple instructions, interacting appropriately with supervisors and coworkers, dealing with changes in work settings and work stress. These basic mental motions involved in every job How are they impacted by the symptoms from whatever the diagnosis happens to be? See, Social Security rarely disagrees with the diagnosis. If a guy's got a scar 6 inches down the middle of his back, he had a back fusion. Social Security's not going to say he didn't. What they're going to say is, so what? He had a back fusion. What can he do despite that back fusion? And they call this in their lingo your residual functional capacity to perform work-related activities. What you can still do on a full-time basis despite your medical problems. And they develop an RFC for every single person that applies. In fact, by the time you see a judge, they usually have 5 different RFCs that they've developed through the course of your case. And then they take that RFC and they relate it to the mythical world of work. Let's understand, this is not a reality-based program. It does not matter in this law whether you could get a job or whether anyone would hire you or whether the jobs you still retain the RFC to perform pay a living wage. None of that's going to be considered, especially for people under 50, slightly at 50 if you don't have a GED, slightly more at 55, but not in a significant way. Let's take an example. Let's take a 49-year-old Chicago carpenter climbing the scaffold tips, falls, crashes on him. He herniates 2 discs in the low back and he needs a back fusion. Now, as a union Chicago carpenter, he was making $43 an hour plus benefits. He's never going to be a $43 an hour carpenter again because he's not going to be able to bend and saw all day and do the tasks of a carpenter. But that's not the test. Social Security is a total disability test. So the question in that case is, can I prove that he could not function as a ticket taker at a movie theater? Wear a little blue jacket, sit stand option in the chair, rip the tickets in half, door number 2, enjoy the show. Shoebox packer in a shoe store, washing machine unloader in a laundromat, coin changer at a self-service gas station. These are the kinds of jobs that Social Security will identify to try to deny clients benefits. A number of years ago, I represented a cardiac intensive care nurse here in Chicago, zapping people with EKGs, saving lives, and all those things we see on TV. She developed rheumatoid arthritis and had 2 claw hands. Social Security denied her application, saying she had the RFC to be a bicycle rental clerk. Back when you could help substance abusers, I was very active in the substance abuse community. I was a consultant with Gateway Foundation. I was representing one of their clients who was in a year-long treatment facility. They denied his application because they said he retained the RFC to be a bank vault security guard. Now, when I told Henry the heroin addict they wanted him to guard the bank vault, he said, Mr. Rabin, I wish how I wish. The point of the stories is the nurse was never going to go rent bikes. Henry was never going to get a job in a bank. But that's not the test. The test is whether I could prove they could not function at those kinds of jobs. So if you want to remember one word, and I have it on this desk that looks like mine and makes poor Charlene groan every morning, one word to remember that covers everything I've talked about so far is the word do, D-O. Social Security is not going to deny you have a disease. They're going to argue or research or try to determine what you can still do despite your disease. Now, this basic law, proving the inability to function in a job, applies to 2 different programs. And let's talk, this is so nice it works. Let's talk about them. The first program is called Title II of the Social Security Act, Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, Workers' Disability, we'll call it SSDI. The second program is Title 16 of the Social Security Act, Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, we'll call it SSI. So we have SSDI, SSI. Let's talk about SSDI first because it's more comprehensive. It has 2 requirements. First, we have to prove you're totally disabled. Second, you must have bought the insurance. And this is a misconception people have. Social Security is not a charity program. This is not a we feel sorry for you program. SSDI is a program you worked and purchased, just like you purchase your homeowner's insurance and you purchase your car insurance and you purchase your life insurance. You do this the same way, and you do it by working and getting a paycheck. And all of you see, you got a lot of lines on your paycheck. Well, the lines in the middle, there are a couple of you all here with some gray hair, so you'll remember when they did say FICA. It doesn't say FICA anymore. I'm pointing to you with the gray hair. Now it says OASDI and Medicare, but combined, those are your FICA payments. And that's the money that's taken out of your paycheck. The boss matches it, dollar for dollar. She reaches into her purse. So every dollar taken out of your check for FICA, she reaches into her purse. The money gets sent out to Washington, D.C., and it goes into the Social Security trust funds. The big trust fund that eats up most of the money is Social Security retirement. Then there's a little one off to the side, and little's in the billions, so we're talking relative here, is called Social Security Disability, and the other one on the other side is called Medicare. And that's how these programs are funded. What's your name? Chris works, and he sends in his FICA dollars. They're matched by the boss, and that money goes in, and then it's immediately paid out. So those of you on disability, or those of you who have parents on retirement or grandparents on retirement, or know somebody getting survivor's benefits, they're getting the money Chris and the boss sent in last month. And then whatever at the end of the month is left over, the trust funds loan to the United States Treasury so that they could lie to us about the size of the federal deficit. Because if they ever factored in the deficit and the debt to the Social Security trust funds, nobody would have any faith in the U.S. economy anymore. So all of you who are getting benefits or know people who are, make sure they have Chris's email and send him a thank you every month for continuing to make his FICA payments. To qualify for SSDI, you have to meet a two-part FICA test. One, you had to have worked 40 quarters in your lifetime. Second, you must have worked and paid FICA taxes for 5 out of the 10 years prior to the date you became totally disabled. Their lingo, 20 quarters of the 40 quarters preceding the onset of disability. So let's take an example. Melissa made me get dressed up today. You learn a lot about me in these talks. My life's pretty much an open book. I'm the world's biggest klutz. And part of the problem with me, in fact, even walking up here, I spilled my stuff and some poor guy's chasing stress balls around the hospital for me. I had to wear shoes with ties. I trip on my shoes on the way out of here. They all get concerned. They rush me up to MRI. They do an MRI and say, oh my God, he's more brain damaged than when he got to the conference. And now I'm totally disabled. I live up in Lake County. I go to Waukegan. The first thing they do is contact my IRS and pull my earnings record. Have I worked 40 quarters in my life? I've now worked more than 40 years, so I got that covered. Then they pull my earnings record from 2008 through 2018. 10 years prior to the year I became totally disabled. Have I worked and paid FICA taxes at least 20 quarters during that time period? I've only worked for 2 years or 14 quarters. Or I worked for cash and never paid the man a dime. I'll have screwed myself because I wouldn't have purchased the insurance. If I'm totally disabled, worked and paid my FICA taxes, I'll get SSDI benefits. The average person on SSDI is supporting her family on about $1,250 a month. Kids under 16 will get benefits, and I get the Medicare card, the federal red, white, and blue health insurance card, after I've been disabled for 29 months. Second program for people who don't qualify for SSDI because they haven't worked and paid into the system is called Title 16 of the Social Security Act, or SSI. SSI has 2 requirements also. Number 1, you must be totally disabled. Number 2, you must be indigent. Indigent for SSI purposes means no money coming into the household and less than $2,000 in non-excludable resources. So what do we mean by non-excludable resources? You're allowed a house. As long as you're living in it, you don't have to be homeless to get SSI. You're allowed 1 car because you have to get to Dr. Hall's office. They won't value your clothes, but they will look in your purse. They will look inside your wallet. They will look for bank accounts, savings accounts, IRAs, 401ks, 203Bs, cash value life insurance, investment properties, poorly drafted family trusts, any asset that can be converted to cash, even if you have to pay a tax or a penalty to access it, counts against the $2,000 limitation. So SSI is a program for people who are totally disabled with very limited financial resources. Now, I have a whole long deeming story that I'm going to cut out because I don't want to use my time up with it. But one of the problems with assets and income testing in SSI is deeming. So I'm going to pick again on Chris and the nice lady next to him. I'm going to make some assumptions. If I'm wrong, please don't get mad at me. But Chris is sitting there with this very nice lady. And what the deeming says is what belongs to Chris belongs to his wife. What belongs to his wife belongs to him. What belongs to the two of them belongs to their minor children. The typical story is the stay-at-home mom. So we're going to pick on Chris's wife, and I'm just, again, making assumptions. Don't get mad at me. Chris's wife hasn't worked. She gets really sick. She wants to get SSI because she hasn't paid into the system, but they're running out of money because of her medical bills. She can't get it because Chris is working. His assets and income, his 401k, his weekly check are all considered to be his wife's. Therefore, because of deeming, she's not indigent and she'll be denied SSI benefits. The meaning of deeming in the United States is that stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home parents get screwed. That's the most common scenario. And this country that puts this huge emphasis on family values puts zero value on a parent staying home to raise children who later gets sick and then can't get help or access to the healthcare system. So it's a huge problem, not going to be addressed in the near future. Okay, so people who are totally disabled may get SSDI, may get SSI. How does Social Security actually think about cases? Because they do think about cases. And in the regulations, that's the fine print. So we talk about the law, and then the law is defined by regulations. The regulations are redefined by the POMs and the HALACs. Those are reinterpreted by the rulings, and then the federal courts change everything again. So there's lots of law in this little niche area. But in the regulations is an analytical framework used by every single decision maker. Adjudicators, judges, appeals counsel, federal court, everybody analyzes cases exactly the same way. They call it in the regulations the sequential evaluation procedure. I'm a roofer's kid. I became a lawyer because I was so bad at roofing, they threw me out of the family business. I can only say sequential evaluation procedure twice in a day and my tongue goes on strike. So instead, I talk about climbing a ladder. That's how I grew up, with the ladders rattling in the back of my dad's Pontiac and the smell of hot tar, which to me is still the greatest smell in the whole world. The first step on the ladder is the one I want to talk about. It's actually the ground floor before you even get on the ladder. And it's called compassionate allowances. About 10 years ago, we finally had a good commissioner. We haven't had a good commissioner before or since. But his name was Ken Astrew. And what Commissioner Astrew said is, you know what? There are some cases where things have progressed far enough that we know we're going to pay them every single time. And if we're going to pay them every single time, why are we putting people through all these hoops? Just send them the benefits. So they started out with 50 conditions. It's now up to about 225 conditions. And if you have one of these conditions, your benefits application should be expedited. By their guidelines, it should be paid in 10 days, but Social Security barely blinks once in 10 days. But it does happen much more quickly if you have a compassionate allowance condition. Adult Huntington's disease is a compassionate allowance condition. It's in the list of cases or applications that should get special treatment. So if you have worked enough to qualify for SSDI, or you meet the asset and income limitations for SSI, and you have progressive Huntington's disease, and you and your doctors agree that, hey, this has gotten to the point where you can't work, take a letter from the doctor explaining that you have this condition and generally what the symptoms are, go to the Social Security office. It's much better here to go to the office. The The best way to go to the office, you go at 8:30 in the morning with a friend. You go at 8:30 because the office opens at 9, and you don't want to get there at 9 because there's a 3-hour wait. So you get there at 8:30 and you bring a friend, because Social Security bureaucrats are busy and they're stressed and sometimes not in a good mood. So you want somebody with you who's not on a lot of medications, who understands what's going on, to be able to have a little better dialogue and also to be able to witness and explain what's going on. When you go to the person, you say, compassionate allowance, and feet should come running and everything should go pretty smoothly and your benefit should be approved. That's how it works in the best of times. Because of our time considerations and because most cases with Huntington's will get paid at the compassionate allowance level, I don't want to go through all the different steps. If I come out to a group and we have more time, we can go through all the steps, but we won't have to do that today because I want to get to the next slide that I want to deal with, and that's here. All right. Now, I realize, after doing this talk for many, many, many years, that I got to a certain point and I've sort of stressed everybody out a little bit, including myself. So, Melissa, if you can help me for a second. I have my box here. I'll keep talking while we're helping everybody de-stress. Whoops. So, you don't get benefits because you have a label. Even in the compassionate allowance guidelines for Huntington's disease, the regulations are looking for evidence of progression of the symptoms. So what is evidence and how do we prove a case? So now I'm going to pick first on you. What's your name? Karen. Candy, I'm sorry. When Candy comes to my office, one of the things I'm going to tell her is what she says to Social Security about her problems is not evidence, because she wants the money. As far as Social Security is concerned, Candy would testify under oath that I still had that full head of curly brown hair that I used to have, if that would get her $1,000 a month. So what she says can never be evidence to win a case. What her sister says, or her mother says, or her husband says, or her best friend says, oh my gosh, Candy, it's so bad. I'm watching what's happening to her. This is terrible. That's not evidence because they like her. The only thing that's evidence in a Social Security disability application, did you get one? Are the records of the treating medical specialist. So, rule number 1, you must be going to the doctor. You must be going to the doctor. You must be going to the doctor. I cannot say it enough. These are medical cases that turn on medical charts, medical notes, medical findings. If you're not going to the doctor, there is no evidence. I hate the analogy that a lot of people like to use about their lawyers being their gunslinger going to fight for them. Honestly, I've never shot a gun in my life except a BB gun when I was a kid. I wouldn't know how to shoot a gun. Well, maybe a rifle because I like John Wayne movies and I've seen him do it. But I don't shoot bullets. I shoot MRI reports. I shoot neuropsychological evaluations. I shoot Beck depression inventories and physical therapy charts. And if you're not, did everybody get one or still passing them out? You want to grab some more? If you're not going to the doctor, I have no bullets. If I have no bullets, I have no evidence. If I have no evidence, you will not get awarded benefits. Rule number 2. And now we're going to we'll pick on you. You're sitting up here in the front. What's your name? Jeannie. So one of the advantages I have up front is that I've been able to see that Jeannie has this really nice smile. You all in the back can't see. Now she's getting embarrassed and now she's going to use it. So I told you all that I was a roofer's kid. And my brothers and I were blessed. We had wonderful parents, learned a lot. They've both been gone for many, many, many years, but think about them every day. And I learned a lot from my dad. He was a tough guy. He'd be up there on the roof and he'd be using the hatchet. And he'd be chopping off the old roof. And remember I told you I'm a klutz? Well, I inherited that from him. So whack, he'd hit his arm with the hatchet instead of the roof, and he'd put a gash in his arm. But the job had to get done. So he'd spit on it, he'd put a glavatar on it, and he'd close it off, and he'd go home. My dad never complained. Never complained. He took care of his family, took care of his parents, did everything he had to do. My dad was not a complainer. The other thing about my dad, he was the world's biggest flirt. I mean, my dad flirted all the time. And I can't tell you how many times my brothers and I and my mom would be outside a restaurant and she'd be stomping her foot on the sidewalk and smoking that cigarette that killed her at 58, waiting for my dad. She thought he was paying the cashier. He was playing with the cashier. And that was my dad. And I kind of inherited, 5 minutes, oh, perfect. I kind of inherited that from him. And I'm a pretty good flirt, and my first wife didn't get to like it so much. My second wife, she kind of understands. It's okay, it's cool. Now, Jeannie, right? She's my psychiatrist. And she's been treating me for a long time, and she kind of knows me, and I like her smile. Today's my day for an appointment with Dr. Jeannie. So I do today what you all do. Every one of you does this when you go to the doctor. You take a shower. You put on a clean shirt. Maybe trim what can be trimmed. I pat down what's left to be patted down. I'm not a whiner or complainer. I got that from my dad. I want to see her smile. I walk into her office. She says, "Hi, Jeff, how are you today?" And I answer her the same way you all do. You all do this. "I'm okay, Doc. How are you?" What does she chart? Well-groomed, nice man says he's okay, and I just lost my disability case. Next month I come in. Now the shirt's a little wrinkled and the eyes are red, and I have this thing that the psychologists call a flat affect. I always think of the iron thing in Monopoly, but I think it means I look sad. And I walk into Dr. Jeannie's office and she says, "Jeff, any new symptoms? Maybe we need to adjust your medications." Well, those of you who deal with or work with people with mental illness, you know the worst thing you can say to somebody is, "I want to change your medications," because people hate the ups and downs with medication changes. "Oh, no, 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 Dr. Jeannie, really things are okay. It's just a bad week. The dog pooped on the carpeting and the kid had a problem at the school, but there are no new symptoms." What does she chart? Jeff says no new symptoms. Next week I come in, now I'm a mess. The clothes are all wrinkled. I haven't showered. She kind of has to grab that Febreze bottle under her desk when I walk in. She's really concerned about me. "Hey, Jeff, are you sure things are stable? Maybe we need to talk about that intensive outpatient program over at Rush Hospital." What do I hear? Hospital. I've been in those mental health hospitals. They're bad. "No, no, 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 no. Really, I'm stable. I had to go to the principal and then I punched him, but it wasn't my fault. It was his fault. But really, things are stable." What does she say right in her chart? Jeff says he's stable. Social Security reads every chart from every medical professional that you see. Doctors, social workers, therapists, OBGYNs. It doesn't, well, if Chris goes to an OBGYN, it's a problem. But everyone else, they will read every single chart. What are they going to read in Dr. Jeannie's? Jeff says he's stable. Jeff says no new symptoms. Jeff says he's okay. Case denied. Rule number 2. When you go to the doctor, tell the truth. Okay? Yeah. You're not going to the doctor because you're okay. You're not considering filing for disability because you're okay. In fact, it's wonderful for doctors to hear how good you're doing, but truly it's not why you're there. You're there to have your problems solved. Now, outside there's a lot of tchotchkes and things that we left for you guys, but one of the more important ones is this calendar. And you'll see it's got big boxes on every day. And we give this to every client. I left enough out there, I think, for almost everybody. Write your symptoms down. I tell people, put this on your nightstand. And at the end of the day, before you go to sleep, talk about whether you got out of bed that day, or whether you fell, or whether you went off on your spouse for no reason at all. If you want your spouse's help, leave it by the toaster oven. And then when you go to see Dr. Hall or any other doctor, bring this with you, and then you're a better communicator to the doctor. 2 things happen. Number 1, you get better medical care because the doctor's hearing more truth. Number two, the charts are accurate and I can get you help. Rule number three here, specialists. Family doctors have a very limited role to play in Social Security cases. So if you have Huntington's, it's the neurologist and it's the social worker and it's the mental health people, because almost all of these chronic conditions result in depression and anxiety because your life just gets tossed upside down. Must be going to the doctor, must be communicating with the doctor, and must be going to the right doctors. If you're doing those things, you'll be generating the evidence you need for your case. And when you and the treating neurologist and the treating specialist agree that it's time to stop working, then it's time to file for Social Security disability. The rest of the handout covers a lot of different material and a lot of different areas of the law. Review it. Never hesitate to contact my office, even if you just have general questions. Either get myself or Kelly or Susan. We don't charge to answer questions. If you think it's a compassionate allowance case, we can either help you do it or we can walk you through how to do it yourself, and we're happy to do that. This is an incredible group that Rush has put together. I mean, you don't find this hardly anywhere with such a wide variety of support and resources. I am totally impressed by the work I've been able to do with them over the years. You're very blessed to have these people. Thank you for letting me come out here today. And if there's any questions while we're getting the panel set up, I can answer questions or I'll hang around for a little bit. So the question is there a limit for how long you'd be on disability? So the answer is sort of yes. When you hit retirement age, you move from disability to the retirement trust fund. The other limit is if you improve. So if Social Security does what they call a continuing disability review and finds that you've had medical improvement sufficient to allow you to return to work, then your benefits may be terminated. So the key is, even if you're on Social Security, keep seeing the doctor and keep communicating, because that communication is what makes the difference. All right, thanks, everybody.